And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Tonight's weather again. Weak system coming across the Bering Sea here, bringing some rain into the Pribilof Islands, eastern Aleutians, and later tonight into the western Alaska Peninsula. And then just showery conditions back behind. Risk of an isolated shower or two here along the southwest coast from Norton Sound on down toward Kuskokwim Bay. Fair and with light winds. Interior Alaska from Arctic coast to the North Gulf Coast, Kodiak Island, drying out here over the Panhandle. But this system trying to come northward, but tomorrow the moisture kind of just goes either to the east or to the west here. So a chance of some rain along the coast of the Panhandle, and winds getting a little gusty on the south coast here as this system starts to pull northward slowly. This system weakens and keeps it kind of damp over the Alaska Peninsula. No change over the interior with very light winds, dry conditions from north to south there. And just really nothing going on out over the Bering Sea or the Aleutians. Then on Tuesday, system comes in out to the west there, but all the wind and rain staying north of the Aleutians, except Shimia, Natu may pick up some small craft advisory level winds and a little bit of precipitation. Sunshine, light winds possible there. Sunshine possible, light winds definitely for the east central Aleutians, the Alaska Peninsula up to the Pribilofs. Dry over the interior with light winds again, and some areas seeing a good amount of sunshine. Wet over the Panhandle as this weakening low comes northward now west of the Queen Charlotte Islands. Coastal water forecast here on the south coast, 25 or small craft advisories on the south coast, east 25 knots, gust to 40 knots there for Prince of Wales Island. Clarence Strait, northeast at 20, north 15 for Stevens Passage, small craft advisories for Lynn Canal, north winds 25 knots, and central coast here northeast at 20, and north coast, north to northeast winds 10 to 15 knots. And then for the day on Tuesday, small craft advisories on the south coast, east and southeast winds 25 to 30 knots, southeast winds 25 knots for Clarence Strait, northeast of 15 for Stevens Passage, Lynn Canal, Glacier Bay, northern inner channels, north winds at 15 knots. And you can see north coast here, winds out of the northeast at 10 knots. Prince William Sound, north winds 15 knots. Eastern North Gulf Coast, north winds 15 knots. Western areas here, variable winds at 10 knots. Barren Islands, northwest at 15. And north winds 20 knots for Kamishak Bay and southern Cook Inlet. Then for Tuesday, Cook Inlet, north to northwest winds 10 to 15 knots. Northwest winds 30 knots for Kamishak Bay, blowing down across the Barren Islands with 7 to 9 foot seas. Light northwest wind at 10 knots for Prince William Sound with 2 foot seas. And variable to north winds 10 to 15 knots for the North Gulf Coast. Kodiak Island, north to northeast winds 15 knots with 2 to 3 foot seas for Monday. Bristol Bay, Alaska Peninsula, light variable wind conditions with seas running 2 to 3 feet. Then for Tuesday, Alaska Peninsula, variable winds 10 to 15 knots, northwest at 15 for Bristol Bay. Kodiak Island, northwest winds 20 to 25 knots, 5 to 10 foot seas. Eastern Aleutians tomorrow, west-southwest winds 20 knots. Adak and Atka, west winds 20 knots. Western Aleutians, mostly west winds on average at about 20 knots. And then for the day on Tuesday, next front coming into the west out here, so that'll bring some small craft advisory winds in with a narrow band of precipitation into the western Aleutians. So west-southwest winds, 25 to 30 knots there, but staying on the light side for Adak and Atka, southwest at 15 with 3 to 4 foot seas. Eastern Aleutians, variable winds, 10 knots, seas 4 to 5 feet. Southwest coast, light winds for the Yukon Delta coast out of the northeast at 5 knots. East at 10 for the Kuskokwim Delta coast, light variable winds for St. Matthew Island. East at 15, seas 5 feet for the Pribilof, St. Lawrence Island. South breeze at 5 knots, seas 2 feet. Southeast at 10 for Norton Sound. And for Tuesday, St. Lawrence Island, northwest wind at 10 knots. Southwest coast, northwest breeze, 10 to 15 knots, 2 to 3 foot seas. Light variable winds for the Pribilofs and east winds at 15 for St. Matthew Island. Chuck CC tomorrow, variable winds 10 to 15 knots, western Arctic coast east at 15, southeast 15 for the central coast. East side here, east winds at 15 knots. And then for the day on Tuesday, eastern Beaufort Sea coast, light southwest breeze, 5 to 10 knots, 2 to 4 foot seas, south at 10 for the central coast, southwest 10 for the western Arctic coast. And the Chuck CC here, kind of a variable wind pattern at 10 to 15 knots with just 2 to 4 foot seas.